G'day, it's Angus from Wait Before You Drive, your food van, caravan, adventure vehicle, tow vehicle, race car weighing specialists. We weigh, analyse and report, and based on the reporting provide you with information on how to provide restorative works if you have any compliance issues. But that's not what we're here for today. Today we're here to discuss the budget conversion from AGM to lithium batteries in a Caravan. The van that I'm talking about is an older elite Eildon Caravan. It was set up with 200 amp hours of AGM or /gel. It didn't really matter, batteries. The batteries are mounted below the van, here and here, and the wiring runs up through the van here, up into a fuse box with what's actually circuit breakers in the top of the van. So with these older vans, there's a slightly different conversion necessary because they were never set up for the high amp or high current produced or able to be produced by lithium. So most of the charging arrangement and the discharging arrangement is sort of based around the 30 amps. Well, in this van, all the fuses were 30 amp. So we had to kind of work around that. So what I've done in this van is, in order to change the batteries, we've had to set to work on the charger. Now you'll notice that I've got a generator in here, and the whole point of this was to get rid of the generator. Now inside here we have a 240 volt to 30 amp charger, lithium compatible. We have a 25 amp DC to DC charger. It also, which charges off the car battery when it's running. We also have a plug here that will take in solar. Then we have a 1500 watt King's inverter, and that runs through, doesn't run through, because of the power supply needed, it runs through this 200 amp circuit breaker. Inside the van, I have a 100/20 MPPT solar controller, which looks after the 150 watt solar panel mounted to the roof. As you can see previously, the King's DC to DC controller also has a solar input, so if need be, I can plug a separate solar panel into that. The car charging is via an Anderson plug, which runs down through the van. It starts off with probably what they call about 6 gauge, 6 AWG wire, and it ends up, I'm not sure how skinny, but it's probably to a 6 mil cable or less. Where that change takes place, I'm not sure, because I can't get inside the chassis to have a look. But that's why, part of the reason I chose the lower ampage charger, because obviously the draw, I could have got a 40 amp one, but I went for the 25. So it's all about being conservative when you're making the conversion. Now with the new regulations around caravans and batteries, it appears that there's a lot more impost being put into where the batteries can be located and how they're located. But it does seem to me, whilst in the compliance stakes, you're better off having them outside the van. Damage wise, probably better inside the van. So we'll start with the batteries, and I'll talk about what I've done there. I bought 2 King's 120 amp hour batteries. They're made up of prismatic cells, and they're suitable to be connected in parallel. So that means that I join the positive and the positive and the negative and the negative together, which retains the 12 volt system, but gives me 120 plus 120, 240 amps of total capacity. So that's the tank, if you like, the storage tank, and then I've got all these different things able to be feeding into it. Now, my background is obviously in caravanning, but also in boating and yachting particularly. And I spent around about 10 years living aboard a yacht, which was standalone with no external power source. Now, I used to had solar panels, still got the boat, solar panels on the boat, and I had the alternator charging through a Sterling Power DC to DC charger, and an alternate. Tricks the alternator into producing more output through a small diesel motor. That was the predominant amount of charging I had in the boat. I also had a shore power unit, which was a battery charger and power supply, much as the Victron one I've got here. I also had an inverter. Now, what I noticed over the years is the things that I blew up, not regularly, but did blow up, were was the inverter. Blew a couple of those up, and actually one of them was quite an expensive one. I blew the DC to DC charger up, blew a couple of those up over the 10 years. Also, one was quite an expensive one. So what I've learned from the lessons of that and what I've put into play here is there's a couple of things that you want to buy good quality, and there's a couple of things that you want to make sure that you can unplug, replace, and plug back in very easily should they break. Now, what I've gone for the Victron 30 amp 240 volt charger. It's a single output one, and it comes in, I've got the figures, we'll talk about the figures a bit later on, but it's quite a reasonably priced unit. I think it was around $250 or something like that. But what that needs to be able to do is much the same as in my boat. When it's plugged in, if I go to a caravan park and it's plugged in, it is the major source of providing power to all the 12 volt outlets in the van. So, and also all of the lighting and anything that operates on 12 volts. So it's got two purposes. It supplies the power while I'm using it, but it also has to charge the batteries. And this is where if you underspec or go cheap on that one, you're highly likely to blow that up, and that's really irritating. So I would suggest buy something of reasonable quality, and depending on the size of your batteries, at least 30, maybe even 40 amps of charging capability, and that should be, quite suitable. Buy a reputable brand. The other thing that I've got, so I plug in. The other thing that I've got going on is I've got the MPPT controller on the roof of the Caravan. Now that is another Victron one, and it's 100/20. So what that means in Victron terms is it can take 100 volts in, and it will decide whether it's a 12 or 24 volt system. In my case, it's a 12 volt system, so it decides it's a 12 volt, and it will put out 20 amps maximum power. Both of these things have Bluetooth, both the Victron controller in the Victron 240 volt charger and the Victron MPPT charger for the solar have Bluetooth applications, and both feed into the battery. So if I'm at a caravan park somewhere, I'm plugged into the 240, does that shut the MPPT controller off? No, it doesn't. I was really unsure as to how that would work with multiple charging sources working at one time. But if your batteries are low, it appears to me, in my experience, and I've had this system running now for a couple of months, is that all of them will contribute a little bit in order to get the batteries up to spec. And we'll talk about why I did this too, because there's some really good solid reasons around why I converted this to this system. So the other thing that I've got is the DC to DC charger. So it will take around about, I think it takes around about 10.8 or 11 volts as an input. So it'll allow for voltage drop over the distance of the from the alternator in the car or the 12 volt charging source all the way to the back of my van, and it will charge to 14.4 volts or whatever, and it'll do it at 25 amps, and it definitely does. It also has an MPPT controller on it. Why didn't I just put the panels straight into that? Well, for a start, it has it will take a maximum of 12 volt panels, not where as opposed to this other one that will go up to 100. So the 12-volt panel will go into the King's one. And if I'm out and about and I want to throw up like a standalone panel, I'll plug it in there for sure. Once again, if the Vitron one's charging, does the King's one charge? Yeah, it seems to. They don't shut each other down. I thought they might, but they don't seem to. So I get significantly higher rates of charge when I do that if I'm stopped. So what's the difference between the 100 volts input on the Vitron and the 12 on the Kings? Well, with if you have an MPPT controller that will take large voltage in, it means that you can connect your panels in series. So, or you could alternatively use garden variety house roof panels because they're 24 volts each. And I could join up to 3 of them together, which will give me 72 volt. Well, actually, it will give me, actually, I'm telling you a lie. No, you've got to look at an open circuit voltage of the panel. So that means if the panel has no controller on it and you were to put a multimeter on it in full sun, what would it give you? Well, I think the 24 volts panels are around about 36 open circuit voltage, and a 12 volt panel has about 20 volts open circuit voltage. So the Kings is fine with up to the 20 volts on the 12 volt panel, but the one on the roof will take up to 100. So I could use potentially 2 house panels producing, as I say, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm thinking around about 72, 74 volts. What's the benefit of that? Well, as long as the MPPT controller receives up to, I think it's 18 volts, 17 to 18 volts as an input, it will continue to charge. So what that does is it allows for partial shading of the panels. So if you're in a yacht like I was, or alternatively in your caravan, and you don't want to be parked out in the blistering sun all day long, you will charge still, even if you just have the panels partially shaded. As long as it gets that 18 in and you've got 78 to start with, you're going to charge. So that's why I've gone with the better controller on the roof, because if I want to add another panel, I'll do it in series. It'll be more efficient charging. It's actually I feel like it's probably a better quality unit. It'll produce more power, and the two major things for me are the solar and the 240. And as long as I've got them charging, I'm pretty good. Now, another thing though, you'll notice in here, I also have this fella, that thing, the old generator. Do I need it anymore? I've still got it in there because I store it in there. But I'm telling you, I probably don't need it, because if I were to plug the car in and run it for an hour, it's going to give me 25 amps. And if I was to plug the generator in and run it for an hour, it's going to give me 30. And it's a heap of weight, and it's, a spark plug, oil, petrol, all the things that I probably don't need. So I think probably I don't really need it anymore. Anyway, now as to the inverter, why do I have the inverter? Well, I have the inverter because sometimes when I'm charging like intelligent batteries, I have an Ego electric chainsaw and Makita tools. If I want to charge things like that have intelligent controllers, they seem to charge a lot better off 240 volts than off 12 volts. So I'll often plug them into the inverter, and I'll show you how I do that in a minute. I'll plug them into the inverter, I'll use that. Sometimes I want to use the microwave. Sometimes I want to, have a coffee. I have a little pod machine. I know they're terrible for the environment. I've got one of them that I use sometimes, and I also have a milk frother or expander, and I can run both of those off that inverter. Now, how do I go about this? A lot of systems, not budget ones, the really, really expensive ones, you just switch your inverter on and it automatically shuts everything off, and it runs the 240 volts and you've got 12 volts, all automated. Well, to my way of thinking, just a hell of a lot to go wrong with these systems. So mine's very basic. I just have that little yellow lead on top of the generator. I plug it into my inverter, switch it on, and then I run the cable from there up to there. And it's the same as I'm plugged. It's like the Caravan thinks I'm plugged into 240 volts. Oddly enough, or not oddly enough, I turned the 240 volt charger off, because that would be like, it doesn't work. You can't charge off your own power. So I turn that off. That's the only thing I have to do. Turn that off and plug into the power, and it powers the van with 240 volts up to 1500 watts, and that's enough for me. I could have bought the 3000 watt inverter, and if I had bought the 3000 watt inverter, I probably could have run the aircon, and well, I could have run the aircon, and that would be for a limited time, unless I was in blazing sun with all my solar panels out, which is probably air time when you might use it. I could still run it for a limited amount of time, but we'll talk about how you calculate that now in a minute. Now, the thing with why did I do this? What was the reason? Well, first of all, I wanted to run the inverter. And if I was going to run the inverter, I would either need a substantial bank of AGM or gel batteries, probably around about 450 amp hours, because with those batteries, they start off at about 14.2, 14.4 hours, and they slowly progress down as the charge runs out. With the lithium batteries, they sit at about 14.2 volts, 14.2, right until they're about to die. Then they drop off the edge and go, and that's the end of it. I can also cycle the lithiums about 2,000 times, and the other batteries will cycle, I don't know, maybe a few hundred times. And the other batteries, the AGM gels, I can probably use the top 45% at max of the usable power. So that 200s, that gave me roughly maybe 90 amps I could use. With these batteries, I really only need to leave about 20% in the battery. So arguably, I can leave 42 in, so I can drain out to about 198 amps without doing any real damage. So yeah, fantastic. And the rate of discharge is phenomenal. So I do not need the 400 AGMs. I can use the 12 volt, the 120s, because they will discharge much quicker. So they last longer, they discharge quicker. These lipos, these ones that I've got from lipo 4s that I've got from Kings, they were cheap. They were $500. Why did I buy them? Because I didn't have a lot of money, and I just wanted to see how good they were, and they seem to have a very good warranty. They seem to have a fairly good reputation with Warranty Kings. So I thought, look, I'll give them a run, and I've had them a few months, and they're great. So they're the major things that people talk about when they talk about how wonderful lithium are, how wonderful they are. Well, there's one thing that people do talk about, but not enough, and it's their ability to accept a charge. Pardon me, it's raining now. The sun comes out for 10 minutes, bang, you've got 5 or 10 amps in your battery. The rate of charge of these things is absolutely phenomenal. It cannot be overestimated, the value in rapidly charging. You hook them up to your car and they'll take 25. They'll take 25 in from the car, and they'll still take 8 off the roof. That they charge so quickly. So you're able to seize every charging opportunity with them, whether it's from the car, whether it's from the 240 volts, whether it's from the solar, wherever it's coming from, they charge up so quickly. So it just means that you're topping up all the time, and they just don't seem to falter. So when I did the conversion, as I said, I've kind of like kept all of the amps down low, because I didn't want to burn out the wiring that's existing in the Caravan. So what I have done, the wiring that I have replaced, is I have put very thick cable, which is 6 to 4 AWG or American wire gauge or B&S, cable, so almost like your car battery cable, between the two batteries to join them, and then back into the inverter, because that's the major drawer. The rest of it I've been able to keep basically the same, so that's been a real cost saver. And so what, I suppose the ultimate question is, what did this all cost me? Now, I've got it written down here because a lot of people are spending thousands and thousands of dollars on these systems, and yeah, sure, it can be a flick of a switch and all the rest of it, but there's just so much to go wrong with these flick of the switch jobs, and I'm in the middle of nowhere a lot of the time, and the parts that I've bought are pretty garden variety. Like, you can get a King's part anywhere. You know, you can, Victron have basically, you know, they've got, in the marine market certainly, and certainly moving into the caravan market, they've got massive backup. So what I've done is, when I've joined these for the part of the purpose, we'll get back to the price, sorry about that, you'll notice that I'm using Anderson plugs wherever I can. And the reason for that is, if any of those components break or blow up, I can just unplug them, screw a new one in, and happy days. So the Victron, so starting at the top, the Victron solar controller was $320. The Victron 240 volt, hold on, no, I'm telling you lies. The Victron 240 volt charger was a sell for around about $320. The Victron 100/20 MPPT controller, the big ticket item here, those two units, that cost me $200. The King's DC to DC 25 amp charger was $250. The King's inverter was $229. The two King's batteries were $500 each, so $1,000, and the circuit breaker was $60, which works out to be $2,059 plus the cabling at roughly $20 a metre. Now, you'll probably do better on the cabling depending on where you go, but it's a very simple system. It seems to work very well. I no longer need the generator to run any of this gear that I want, unless I wanted to run the air conditioner. And I think overall it's been I've significantly reduced the weight because of those batteries, which seem to be very good. I've got no problem with them. They're a prismatic cell, and they are apparently very robust. Now, each of these individual items that I'm talking about, so the Victron 12, 30, 20, 240 volt charger, the Victron 120 MPPT controller, the King's DC 25 amp charger, the King's 1500 watt inverter, and the King's 120 amp lithium batteries all have detailed videos on the individual items, so you can watch them and have a look and see if you think that they're going to work for you. Would I recommend this system? Yeah, I reckon it works pretty well. It was a pretty easy conversion. Took me about a day or a day and a half, and I think it's been pretty good. If you have some basic electrical knowledge, or you pop into somewhere like King's or a Caravan place, they can easily walk you through how to do it, and have a crack. So I hope that this has been of some use to you. Look, if you've got any questions about it, you can ring me or check out my website at Wait Before You Drive. We do other stuff as well, but the weighing is the main thing, so that's what I like to concentrate the bulk of my energies on. But if you have got any questions, please feel free to make contact with me. Hopefully you'll give me a like, and any questions, please send them to me. Thanks for watching.